under the cold glow of Seoul's midnight lights. A silence hung heavy in the air, one that felt almost unnaturally still, as if the entire city had paused for a heartbeat. Streets were empty. The wind brushed lightly against closed storefronts, and the last buses had already retreated into their depots. But somewhere within the sleeping city, a moment was unfolding that would soon shake the entertainment world awake. The night was suddenly split open by the sharp wail of an ambulance siren, racing through the quiet like a warning. Nurses rushed across the hospital entrance, hurried footsteps echoing against the sliding doors as they prepared for an incoming emergency. The lights inside burned harsh and white, illuminating the seriousness of the situation as paramedics pushed in a stretcher. On it lay actress Jung Hae-in, pale, trembling, breath unsteady. Her long day had finally caught up with her, and her body had simply given out. Earlier that evening, she had been filming until almost midnight, absorbing lines, action cues, emotional beats, and endless retakes. She had smiled through exhaustion, laughed through dizziness, and reassured staff that she was fine even when her legs felt like they could no longer hold her up. For weeks, she had been juggling back-to-back commitments, promotions, drama filming, commercial shoots, and although her fans had noticed her gradually weakening appearance, So-min kept insisting she wanted to give her best performance without complaint. Behind the bright, polished images were moments no camera ever caught: skipping meals, staying awake through long nights of script readings, and pushing through body aches with nothing but determination. The hours before her collapse were marked by subtle warnings that only those closest to her saw. A makeup artist recalled how So-min's hands trembled slightly when holding a script. A lighting technician noticed her nearly lose balance during a scene. A staff member had quietly whispered that she looked too thin, too weak, too quiet. Yet she continued to smile, the kind of smile that hides pain, not joy. Then, as the final scene ramped and she headed toward the waiting room, her steps faltered, her vision darkened, and before anyone could react, her body simply crumbled to the floor, silencing the room in a gasp. Calls erupted instantly. Someone dialed emergency services. Someone screamed for a manager. Someone tried to help her sit up, but her consciousness had faded, slipping away like a whisper. When the ambulance finally pulled up, her face was drained of color, her breathing too shallow. The paramedics' expressions hardened. This wasn't a small fainting spell. It was the result of severe physical exhaustion. As the ambulance drove away, members stood frozen, their shock cutting deeper than the cold wind. By the time the ambulance arrived at the hospital, news had already begun to leak through online communities. A staff member's anonymous comment on a forum sparked a wildfire. "I think a famous actress was rushed to the hospital just now. It didn't look good." The post spread like smoke, fueling speculation across SNS platforms. Some fans recognized the location from blurry photos shared online. Others stayed up refreshing their feeds, waiting for any update, any reassurance. Within minutes, hashtags about Jung So-min began rising in real-time searches. Fans typing frantic messages: "Is she okay? Why was she still working at this hour? Please let it not be serious." The world outside buzzed with panic. Yet inside the hospital, the atmosphere was far heavier, quieter, colder. Doctors worked quickly, checking her pulse, her oxygen levels, her blood pressure, numbers that showed clearly what her body had been enduring: extreme fatigue, severe dehydration, overwork. That sounded clinical but carried a harsh truth. She had been pushing herself past her limit for far too long. As So-min lay unconscious in the room, an eerie stillness filled the corridor. Nurses moved with gentle urgency, lowering the lights, adjusting her IV line, covering her with a soft blanket. The temporary calm of the hospital contrasted sharply with the storm brewing online. Every minute, speculation grew. But amidst the chaos, one question rose repeatedly. Then the rest: where's Jung Hae-in? Their names had long been tied together, not officially, not by confirmation, but through the undeniable chemistry they once shared on screen and the quiet, subtle glances that fans never forgot. Both actors had repeatedly denied any romantic involvement, insisting they were just colleagues. The public never fully believed it. And that night, the mere possibility of his reaction became a mystery more gripping than the incident itself. People began to wonder why he hadn't posted anything. He hadn't been seen. Whether he even knew what had happened. Some fans defended him, insisting he might be unaware or perhaps already en route. Speculated that he would avoid involvement to prevent unnecessary rumors. But whispers grew. Would a colleague really appear at the hospital in the middle of the night? Would he ignore the news entirely? Would he keep his distance, or rush to her side? The contradictions between their official statements and the emotional undertones of their past interactions resurfaced in the minds of many. Their denials had been calm, measured, professional, but their chemistry on and off set had always hinted at something deeper. And now, as Jung So-min lay unconscious under the harsh fluorescence of a hospital ward, the weight of that contradiction pressed even heavier on the narrative. Rumors stirred like wind through dry leaves. Restless and relentless, would his actions tonight reveal a truth that words had always tried to hide? Outside, the night air felt unbearably tense. If the city itself was waiting for an answer. Inside, the slow rhythmic beeping of the medical monitors kept time, marking each second of uncertainty. What no one knew yet, what would soon become the spark that ignited a wave of speculation, was that Jung Hae-in had already heard the news. And his next move, made quietly, hesitation, would shift the entire story into new territory. And that moment was approaching fast. Quietly but inevitably, like the calm before a storm that no one was prepared for. The hospital corridor was washed in dim yellow light. Except for the muffled hum of machines and the soft echo of nurses' shoes against polished floors. It was nearly 1 a.m. when the automatic doors slid open again, not with the urgency of paramedics this time, but with the silent entrance of a figure dressed in black, cap pulled low, mask covering half his face. Anyone else might have blended into the shadows. Staff at the front desk recognized him instantly. There was a particular way he carried himself, subtle, calm, but with a tension beneath the surface. You were holding back a storm. Jung Hae-in didn't wait for confirmation before moving down the hallway. His steps were firm but quiet, purposeful in a way that left no doubt. He wasn't here by chance. A nurse called out softly, asking whom he was visiting. But he only bowed politely and kept walking. It was as if he already knew exactly where she was. And perhaps he did. The news had reached him not through social media, through an official manager's call, but through one person on the film crew who knew the truth. He cared. The brief message had been simple: So-min collapsed. Hospital. Yet enough to send him out the door without a second thought. Even for someone who claimed to be just a colleague. His reaction was immediate, instinctive, unrestrained. When he arrived outside her hospital room, he stopped. The hallway was silent. And through the small window on the door, he could see her lying there, pale, still, fragile in a way that felt painfully unfamiliar. She was always lively, always vibrant, glowing with energy on set or during interviews. Seeing her reduced to this vulnerable state pierced him deeper than he expected. He didn't enter right away. Instead, he stood there quietly, gripping the strap of his messenger bag, inhaling deeply as if steadying himself. Nurse approached him gently. "Are you family?" she whispered. He paused, then shook his head. "Just someone who's worried." But the emotion in his eyes told a different story. Nurse nodded, sensing there was more beneath the surface, and allowed him to stand outside the room. For a while, he remained motionless, watching through the narrow window as the doctor checked her IV line. Every small movement inside made his jaw tighten. Every beep from the monitor made his heart drop a little more. Finally stepped inside only after the doctor left. Antiseptic filled the room, cold and sterile. Approached slowly, as if afraid he might wake her. She was deep in unconscious rest. When he reached her bedside, he hesitated again. His hand hovered over her arm, close enough to touch, but trembling ever so slightly. In the end, he didn't place his hand directly on her skin. Instead, he adjusted a blanket, it gently up to her shoulders to keep her warm. The gesture was small, but carried the weight of someone who had thought about her more often than he ever admitted. What he didn't realize was that a journalist from a late-night news outlet had arrived just minutes earlier. The hospital wasn't crowded, only a few reporters had gathered outside, trying to verify the rumors. Them caught a blurred, distant picture of a man adjusting So-min's blanket, leaning slightly over her with unmistakable tenderness, though his face was hidden beneath the cap and mask. Later recognized his posture, the curve of his shoulders, even the watch on his wrist. Inside the room, Jung Hae-in pulled a chair closer and sat beside her bed. He didn't speak, but the silence between them was heavy. with unspoken thoughts. After several minutes, he lowered his head into his hands. It had been a long time since he'd felt such overwhelming helplessness. He had always admired her resilience, how she worked, how she carried burdens quietly. She endured long days without ever letting anyone see her struggling. But now, looking at her lying there, wondered if he had overlooked signs he should have noticed earlier. The hours stretched on. He stayed by her side as nurses came and went. The clock ticked past 2. Then 3 in the morning. Didn't check his phone. Didn't step out for air. He simply remained, unmoving, waiting. And each time her fingers twitched or her breathing shifted, his attention snapped to her immediately. Afraid she might relapse. Outside, the situation grew more chaotic. Leaked image spread online, throwing fans into an emotional frenzy. Comments flooded SNS platforms. "That's definitely Jung Hae-in. Why would he go at that hour if they're just colleagues? Is going on between them? Don't deny it anymore." Agencies reacted quickly. At 4 a.m., a staff member released a short statement. Hae-in visited as a concerned colleague. There is no romantic relationship. But the public was no longer convinced. The timing, the secrecy, the emotion on his face in the photo, it contradicted every carefully worded denial they had ever made. Sometimes actions screamed louder than official statements, and on this night, his actions had spoken volumes. By dawn, a thin light crept through the blinds, softening the room's harsh fluorescent glare. After sitting by her side for nearly 4 hours, Jung Hae-in finally rose to his feet. His back ached, his eyes were red. Fatigue weighed heavily on him. Yet he looked at her one last time before stepping out. He placed a blanket more securely around her shoulders, brushing a stray lock of hair away from her forehead in a gesture so gentle it was almost heartbreaking. A nurse caught a moment and smiled faintly, but said nothing. She understood. When he walked into the hallway, reporters were already waiting outside, cameras raised. The flash of light startled him, and for a moment he froze. They called out his name, asking question after question, but he didn't respond. He bowed deeply. Expression of sincere gratitude and worry etched into his face, then said softly, "Please pray for her recovery." Voice cracked, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. That single sentence spiraled across social media, interpreted 1,000 ways. As he left the hospital, fans gathered outside began to murmur. Recognized him immediately and gasped. Others quietly captured the moment on their phones, spreading the images online within minutes. His presence there, early, emotional, announced, sent shockwaves through the entertainment community. Meanwhile, inside the hospital room, Jung So-min stirred faintly. Her eyelashes trembled as she slowly regained consciousness. Vision blurred. She noticed the blanket around her, neatly arranged, warmer than before. She recognized the faint lingering scent, a familiar cologne she knew well from their filming days. Realizing who had been there, a soft, weary smile formed on her lips. She didn't need to see him to know. Sometimes, the truth doesn't come from what people say, but from the small, quiet things they do when no one is watching. And on this night, Jung Hae-in had revealed more than any statement, press conference, or interview ever could. Concern, loyalty, affection, feelings too deep to hide behind the word colleague. As the sun rose over Seoul, casting gentle light over the city, headlines were already taking shape. Fans debated, agencies scrambled, and reporters pieced together timelines. Beneath all the noise, all the speculation, one reality settled softly between them. In the silent hours of the night, when she needed someone most, he came. Not as a co-star, as a colleague, but as someone who cared enough to show up. And sometimes, showing up says everything.